Could iron be playing a role in why you're not feeling so great? Fix iron first is the mandate that Dr. Libby has given us, and that is what we're talking about on today's show. You'll know that if you listen to the podcast live, every month we have amazing low-tox businesses helping you with your swaps or stock-ups. Check out the 2 offers we have below, both for Aussies, with the Edible Beauty offer also being for our US watchers and listeners. Enjoy. Hello, Libby. How are you doing?
Alex, I'm so well, thank you. It's a joy to see your beautiful face.
It is so awesome to chat with you. I cannot believe it's actually been quite as long. I know we always chat because we're both mad tennis fans. So the DMs run hot during Grand Slam season. But today we are here for a conversation about iron. And I'm just going to jump right in. Everybody knows you. You heard about the amazing Libby in my intro. Why iron? Why now?
Alex, it's because it's not getting the attention that it needs. So I've just written a book, Fix Iron First, and the tagline kind of answers the question, the one thing that fixes everything. So the reason I use that is right now I feel that we're trying to make health quite complex. And so we have to, blame it on and also too, I think if someone is experiencing digestive system problems, a challenging perimenopausal transition, headaches, lousy sleep, you can feel that it's really tricky to know where to start.
Of course.
And so what I have seen I've worked with people for 25 years, and what I've seen time and time again is that when there's iron deficiency, and it is the most common nutritional deficiency in the world,
wow,
a lot of women will just say to me, oh, but I've always been like that, or it's just iron deficiency and all my friends are. So we fob it off. So why iron right now is because I feel we're overlooking this really, what I think is a real basic, a real fundamental to our well-being, because iron is actually needed for so much to work well inside of us. So I'll give you a few examples. We literally require iron to be able to produce thyroid hormones.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's a really big one. So to make the hormones and then also to convert inactive thyroid hormone into active thyroid hormone, you need iron. You also need selenium and zinc for that. So and the symptoms of an underactive thyroid and iron deficiency overlap. And right now, and this is a big topic in its own, but right now there's kind of a tendency in our culture to talk about anxiety purely as a psychiatric condition, and for people to feel that the solution is purely medication. Now, that might be the right road for someone. However, anxiety is also a symptom of iron deficiency. And I worry about people of all ages and stages, particularly teenage girls with this.
Yes.
Because it's very, very, iron deficiency is so common for teenage girls when they start to menstruate. And I worry that a real fundamental, again, is not being addressed. So why iron right now? I feel that this basic is being missed, and I want to fix that first, and then I want to see what's left over. So if, let's say, pick on perimenopause. For some women, it's debilitating. For others, they suffer in such a mild way or not at all. I've had women in the interviews I've conducted say, my period's just stopped. So not everybody experiences a challenge. So for those who are challenged by it, if they are also iron deficient, let's address that, and then let's see what's left over. And let's say 50% of this intensity of their symptoms improves, or 80%. And then we've just got a quality of life instantly is better. We're more robust, we're more resilient, we have better energy, better sleep, better thyroid function, and we can handle things way better. So it's a long-winded answer to your question. But
yeah, that's okay. It kind of helps us know where we're going to start unpacking things. But I want to circle back to the anxiety that you mentioned there, because is what's happening when we've got the iron deficiency, it's almost like there's literally not enough petrol in the tank, and it's that mix between fatigue and therefore overwhelm that can generate anxiety as a clinical picture, where you actually don't have anxiety, you've got a deficiency. Is that what you're trying to sort of spell out there?
Yes, and also there's more to it. So we literally require iron to be able to produce GABA. So it's that lovely calming neurotransmitter.
The chill pill.
The chill pill. scientific way to say it.
Mm.
So when we're iron deficient, our dopamine production is also affected. So hugely, obviously impacted on motivation. And then we need it to produce GABA for that lovely chill pill effect. So when we are iron deficient, all of that gets disrupted. The production of those neurotransmitters is disrupted. And also, one of the symptoms of iron deficiency is heart palpitations. So our heart can race. And when you feel that in your chest and we don't quite know what it is, it's very uncomfortable. And so our
Mm.
brains immediately go, what's that? And there's, again, because anxiety is such a topic of conversation right now, which is brilliant because a lot of people get the help they need. I worry that the biochemistry and the nutrition get forgotten, and it's all become, we've just got to treat this as a condition rather than see it as a symptom. So
Mm.
yeah, it goes hand in hand with what you said, and also those neurotransmitters are affected. There's
Yeah.
actually a study was actually published, Alex. It'd be a good one to pop in the show notes. I think it was published in 2023, and it was called The Clinical Manifestations of Iron Deficiency Anemia. And a big chunk of them were psychiatric symptoms.
Yeah,
And
I remember when I was a teenager, funny teenage girl. I remember my doctor kind of going like this and going, "Oh, okay, let's get your iron checked," because it wasn't pink at all. And he was a bit old school, but sure enough, I had anemia. I think I got put on some iron supplement. I'm really looking forward to unpacking that because I know a lot of people are very unhappy with how that then ends up playing out for them, supplements and infusions. But to your point there, I remember having some really big lows, like really big lows. Um, and I was a pretty happy teenager. Like there wasn't anything that would be causing them other than something biochemical, in my view, if I think about that time. And, now that we have this research, it's just so validating for people's retrospective kind of looks at their lives. And you think, that makes sense now. And that can be hugely beneficial to a healing picture when something just deeply feels like it finally makes sense.
I agree, Alex. And you think someone actually said to me, because I've been obsessed with iron for a really long time. And it's
Yeah.
kind of like I'm really boring to have dinner with right now because it's all I want to talk about. Uh, so when it comes up as a topic, as it inevitably does if I'm around,
Mm.
someone actually said to me recently, you know what? I remember that from the 80s. I remember being a teenager in the 80s and it was checked. And I don't feel like that's happening as much now. And
Huh.
so it's because, again, it's we want to or we tend to have this thing, oh, it's all a bit complicated, and it's, we can complicate health, and sometimes we need to, but often, yeah, let's look at these simple basics first and get those.
Yeah. So, can we wind it back to childhood? Because something that you do in the new book, which I love, is really step out how it looks at different phases of life so that people can tune in to
Mm.
either their child that they're raising, or their teenager now going through puberty, or the perimenopause years or beyond. Um, what are we looking for, just briefly, in some of those key stages of life? And
Yeah.
is it different for girls and boys? If I can throw that one in too.
So love your questions. Thank you. So when we're born at birth, mum confers iron stores to the baby. The baby's been accumulating iron in its liver as it's grown. So babies born prematurely are at greater risk of iron deficiency because they haven't had as much time to accumulate that iron. There's also a greater risk of a baby being born deficient if mum has iron deficiency anemia at birth.
Hmm.
So they're things to watch out for. And then breast milk is very low in iron. It hardly contains any. And that's because for the first 6 months of life, bub is supposed to utilize what was conferred at birth, essentially. And a pediatrician is the best person, obviously, to guide a new mum as to whether a brand new baby may require some help with iron or not. But then once a child, from 6 months onwards, their iron requirements, they vary between 9 and 11 milligrams. So just for ease of conversation, I'll just take the middle of that point and we'll say, let's say a young child needs 10 milligrams of iron per day. So that is a decent amount of iron that we then need to obtain through what we're eating.
Mm.
And I feel it's being overlooked. Obviously, our best food sources of highly bioavailable iron is in offal, so our liver, things like that, and of course our red meat. And what I've found is, particularly by the age of about 3, I've had so many mums say to me, it's as if my child is vegetarian, even though in our family we do eat meat and it is offered, they just don't want it. And that in itself is actually a classic sign of iron deficiency. So picky eating or poor appetite is a classic sign of iron deficiency in children, as is a tendency in their little temperaments to go very quickly to irritation and agitation. So that their face will usually be pale as well. The iron deficiency is quite significant once the face has gone pale. And you may notice in an iron deficient child, there'll be a visible blood vessel on their face. Sometimes it's across the bridge of their nose or on their temple. You'll notice that as well. So, and obviously you'll notice they tire out. So they're classic symptoms. Then once we need iron for growth and development, and there's some things that can be recovered. Once a child is iron deficient, there are some skills and aspects of their development that can absolutely be recovered once iron is restored. But if it does go on for too long, there are some aspects of their development that we just don't recover. So again, I want to scream it from the rooftops and support people in ways to really be able to address this in their little ones, because growth, development, IQ, as well as their temperament and their ability to eat in a broad way, all of that's affected by iron deficiency, which can obviously have a big ripple effect.
Well, and I'd imagine it then can create a feedback loop where it makes it worse and worse, because the poor appetite has kicked in, and then the lack of wanting meat, animal-based products is, for the easiest source of assimilation is sort of there, and then it gets worse and worse.
Yeah, that's exactly.
Okay.
And then, of course, Alex, we hit the teenage years. And so that's where you asked about boys and girls differing in their requirements. And that's where it does change. So obviously with the onset of menstruation for girls, their requirements increase. And it's often at a time, very sadly, where the teenage girls are becoming more aware of what they eat, and they can develop preferences, or they can be influenced by their friends or by social media from people who may not have a focus on making sure their iron status stays robust. Very easily start to make dietary choices that don't give them the iron that they need right at a time when they require more.
Okay, I'm going to be a little bit more frank than you are there, Miss Diplomacy. Something I notice, because I have a lot of girlfriends who have girls. For some reason, I was the boy mum that got caught up in the girl mum group who were just cooler people. And so that's where I hung out in junior school parenting life. And so we've stayed in touch, and I hear all the stories, and I am horrified at this interesting duality between vegetarian, vegan influencers influencing in a way that talk about it through the weight loss lens, and then the food and eating disorders can start to creep up. Like, all of my friends at one time or another have all said, I've just noticed that they've stopped saying yes to the ice cream on Friday night. We'd always just have a little dessert as a family, and all of a sudden no, and all of a sudden smaller portions, and all of a sudden no meat, please. And it's actually getting rid of some of the denser, obviously we shouldn't be like chowing down on ice cream, but like the meat and the fattier kind of foods like avocado or slow cooked lamb, or that they would always have eaten before, are all of a sudden kind of big no-nos. Like they could see visible anxiety develop around those sorts of foods. And I am all for people finding their dietary preferences in adult life, and then working with health professionals to make sure they're receiving adequate intake. But I'm worried for our teenage girls and the impact you insinuated, lifelong impact. Is there a lifelong fertility impact in iron, lack of iron in teenage years?
It can be recoverable, but
Okay, great.
yeah, so but if you think too about so often for younger, thank you for saying what you said. I can be a little bit too Switzerland.
I'm usually very Switzerland as well, but like
No, no.
because I've got such a human experience with girlfriends on the phone. What do you think I should do? Like that kind of thing kind of puts like it turns it into a full body experience of concern rather than a preference or belief, which I think everyone's entitled to. Everyone on my show knows that everyone's entitled to that, but we actually have to address deficiency in growing bodies as a paramount important issue.
And uh, I'll be honest, I don't know how good the cameras are. I was very teary when you were describing that.
Mm,
It's something that I too have seen more in a clinical setting with
yeah.
patients for years. And it's always been there, but it's getting worse.
Mm.
And it's so concerning because it's right at a time where you think about how so much of, sorry,
Oh, Libby, I wish I could give you a hug.
you
It's
can,
hard. It's the real problems and this tech bubble and algorithm that kind of sends people into these truth silos that aren't the truth. It really just are playing out in all sorts of crazy ways.
and you think about so much of our sense of self develops in those teenage years, who we
Mm.
perceive ourselves to be. So many of our beliefs about ourselves develop at that time. And when you start to feel really uncomfortable in your own skin, or you, in some cases, falsely believe you have a condition when it's just iron deficiency,
Mm.
if you think you have a condition or you get diagnosed with a condition because what might be underlying it hasn't actually been properly addressed, and so you're not aware of it, so you can't address it, if you believe there's something wrong with you, you grow up, I think, with a belief system that can change the course of your life. So
Mm.
when you believe there's something wrong with you, it impacts your self-perception around your own intelligence and the education you perceive you're capable of obtaining. It impacts the friendships you maintain, or even your ability to make new friends because you think, oh, no one will like me. And also too, I think it impacts when you start to develop intimate relationships and you think there's something wrong with you. I think it can be one of the reasons why we stay in relationships way longer than are healthy for us,
Mm.
because you think, oh, I'm on the receiving end of some pretty lousy treatment here, but I won't go because no one else will like me or care for me or love me or whatever the story is. And so I sort of see this, I see iron as can play, it's not always, it's not the solution to everything, but I
Mm.
can see that it plays this really big role in those teenage years around our perception of ourselves that can have a really big impact on what our whole future looks like. So I'm on a bit of a mission to change that. And that doesn't mean if someone, you can imagine that working with people in the nutrition space, there are people who you can feel it when they choose to be vegan or vegetarian from deep inside themselves,
Mm.
actually part of who they are.
Yeah,
And then you can also feel it when someone's doing it from peer pressure or
a
because they
100%.
school, or
Mm.
and that's it's not my job to it was never my job to change. Like you're saying, you pick that for yourself. My job was to always make sure whatever way you feel is right for you to eat, I'm going to make sure that is
As
nutritionally
healthy as
right.
possible. Yeah, yeah. Helps you feel good.
And but I feel that a lot of teenage girls go down that road of, I'm going to cut meat out in an attempt to kind of control my body,
Mm.
which is an inaccurate, it's not, it doesn't do that. They actually then
Yeah.
of course start missing out on nutrients that they need for a really healthy metabolism, but they don't know that at the time, and so then they justify those choices, and then I think iron deficiency, yeah, unfolds from that, because it is very hard to meet our requirements from food alone once we do start to menstruate. So for teenage girls, they need 15 milligrams of iron per day just to prevent deficiency. And then once we're 18, I actually think the 18-year-old recommendation, I think, needs to be dropped from when menstruation starts. but from 18 onwards, we need 18 milligrams of iron per day just to prevent deficiency. And if we eat in a vegan or vegetarian way, we multiply that RDI by 1.8. So that means that a girl in that situation needs 32.4 milligrams per day. And no one can eat that. Well, you can if you're really focused on it. But my point is, even someone who eats in a robust, healthy, eats for satiety kind of way, it's really hard to meet your iron requirements. It's impossible if you're skipping meals or restricting food groups or having coffee for lunch. You're not going to meet your iron requirements. And so, yeah.
Can you just help me? Just beginner's mind factor, Libby, and just so people aren't there going, hold on, but you need more if you're vegetarian. How does that work?
Yeah, so if someone eats in a vegetarian or vegan way, their only source of iron is in the ferric, a non-heme form.
Got it.
Non-heme iron has to be, so ferric iron, which is Fe, bit of geeky science, Fe3 plus, has to be converted into Fe2 plus, ferrous iron, for that to be able to be used. And so in those foods, when someone eats vegan or vegetarian, they're only getting the iron that has much, much lower bioavailability, which is why we're told to pair it with vitamin C. You can actually pair that with any acid. Obviously, vitamin C is ascorbic acid. Plus, we need really good stomach acid production to be able to absorb.
Which a lot of people don't have in modern diets. Yeah.
Exactly. And then we add to that the increase in the consumption of what are iron absorption inhibitors. So in those plant foods, there's oxalates and phytates, there's polyphenols, and all of those things disrupt, they can impair iron absorption. So to overcome the inhibitors and to overcome the poorer bioavailability, the RDI is increased for anyone who eats vegan or vegetarian.
Wow. Okay. And then it becomes eat more food, and then the chance of getting teenage girls to do that is often slim to none.
Yeah.
And that's how we end up with the problem.
Exactly. And so then, so obviously, and you asked about fertility earlier, and so we need good iron levels to foster ovulation, and ovulation obviously is what leads to progesterone production. And I know you've had some superstar experts on your show, Alex, talking about the immense benefits of progesterone, not just for fertility, but its biological aspects, its anti-anxiety nature.
Freaking brilliant stuff.
The way it acts.
Yeah.
It acts on GABA. So all calming, anti-anxiety, it's a diuretic. So it has a lot of beautiful properties. And so when we're iron deficient, it can impair ovulation. There's very robust research around that. So again, for younger women to establish really healthy menstrual cycles, and also for women going through perimenopause, but at all years, all moments across our menstruation years, we want ovulation to be this beautiful cyclical potent event where we get that lovely big surge of progesterone, and iron deficiency impacts that, and we can end up with all sorts of period problems.
Gosh, okay. And so let's just say teenager doesn't get the memo. Is that what you're saying can then start to feed into a bigger picture of period issues, cycle symptom exacerbations, and all that jazz?
Yes.
And how about metabolically?
So obviously we need iron for thyroid hormone production, as we touched on. It takes, so actually we'll just pause on that moment, because every cell in the body has receptors for thyroid hormones. And interestingly, every cell in the body also has receptors for vitamin D. I find that fascinating. Anyway, story for another day.
Well, especially with the D hormone connection, we now know is very, very present. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so if I get people to imagine that their physical structure is made up of 50 trillion cells, and to picture a cell, imagine someone took a pencil and drew a circle. So that's a cell. And I get people to imagine that the cells, every cell has a little city inside them. And it's extraordinary. Harvard have actually done a really amazing animation. Talk about cry. Tears roll down my face when I watch that animation at the absolute, I'm in awe. And that's happening in all of us, and our own brains aren't instructing that. Blows my mind. Anyway.
I'm going to put that in the show notes as well. I need to make a list. Okay, good.
We love a list. So, so imagine that all those and all of those cells, all of those circles to run the little cities inside of them, which is what drives how we feel and function and look, every single one of those cells needs thyroid hormones. And so obviously for our thyroid to make hormones, the pituitary gland in our amazing brain sends a signal, which is TSH, to the thyroid, and that says, please wake up and make your thyroid hormones. And then for the thyroid gland to literally be able to construct the thyroid hormones, think of it like a recipe. One of the main ingredients for the recipe is iron. So if there's not enough iron available, because iron gets sent preferentially where it needs to go to maintain life, if it's in limited supply, the thyroid won't get as much as it needs. It might be asking for a full bucket and it's only going to get delivered half a bucket of iron. So then we don't make enough thyroid hormones. Plus the conversion of T4, the inactive thyroid hormone, into the active one, T3, that's disrupted as well. On your blood tests, things usually won't be out of the normal range, but your T4 and your T3 will be low end normal. So you'll just be told that everything's fine. And that's why with blood testing, it's so incredibly useful to test all the iron parameters alongside thyroid parameters, because the road in is the road out. Whatever creates the dysfunction needs to be addressed. So, because that's the thing that'll get you out of the problem.
Yes, so true. And on that testing front, just so people have the language to give GPs, because a lot of people say, can you check my thyroid and my iron? And you'll get one value for TSH and one value for iron, maybe ferritin, and that'll be it. But you want iron studies and you want a thyroid profile.
Yes, spot on, Alex. Your knowledge is so immense in so many areas. So
400 doctors, it kind of builds up over the years.
But yeah, so iron studies is 4 tests.
Yeah.
So iron, and the actual iron that is measured is quite a reflection of recent dietary intake or supplement. Then you've got transferrin. Transferrin is the bus. Transferrin is the bus that drives the iron around. And in iron deficiency or iron deficiency anemia, transferrin is high, which is confusing because you see that on your blood test and think, oh, that's high. Have I got too much iron? No, that's the bus that drives it around, and the body's making more buses in an attempt to send them out to pick up more passengers, the passengers being the iron, and there's just not enough passengers to fill the bus. Transferrin goes up in iron deficiency and iron deficiency anemia. Then you've got transferrin saturation, so that's how many people are on the bus, how many iron units are actually attached to the transferrin. And then you have ferritin, and that's your iron storage. And just while we touch on that, Alex, in Australian and New Zealand pathology labs, the normal range for ferritin is 20 to 220 micrograms per litre.
That's a rather large range there, Libby. Please explain. Yeah.
So it's kind of wild. And in my clinical experience, that bottom number is too low. So I find that most women, your minimum needs to be 50, but then push it further and aim for 80 or 100 micrograms per litre for way better, robust metabolic health, thyroid function, to have that lovely anti-anxiety effect, incredibly, and much better energy, better sleep. So push to that 80 or 100. But, and again, Alex, I have met, it's literally thousands of women who their ferritin will be 22. So yeah, it's just inside the normal range, and they're told they're fine, but they feel dreadful. Most women feel dreadful when their ferritin's at 22. So so they are iron studies, those 4 tests. And then, as you said, a full thyroid panel. So TSH, T4, T3. I'm a big fan of also testing thyroid autoantibodies, but at minimum, though, TSH, T4, T3. If you want to, you can also request reverse T3, which again, so just to touch on that for 2 seconds.
Oh, no, please do, because it's a bit sort of forgotten and a lot of doctors poo-poo it. But if we need to be better at advocating for it, tell us why.
So when you make T4, and for it to turn into active T3, you need, as we talked about, iron. And in iron deficiency, that conversion of T4 inactive increases the conversion to RT3, reverse T3. So RT3 goes up with chronic elevated cortisol, and it goes up in iron deficiency. They're 2 of the main contributors to elevated RT3. And the problem with that is, in our body, we have an a finite number of receptors for thyroid hormones to bind to. So I get people to imagine like a lock and a key, and you want your thyroid receptors to get filled up with actual T3, because if reverse T3, its structure's so similar, it's a mirror image of actual T3. RT3 can bind to those receptors and it blocks the space where you want the actual T3 to bind. So all of that improves when we restore our iron levels.
Oh, wow. Okay. So can I take you through? This is, I may have been looking back to see if I had an iron studies blood test to workshop live, and I
Lovely.
have found one. Now, this is 2 years ago. I can't remember what it was last year, but I do remember there was nothing in the low and red anymore, because I did some work on it. But can we just talk through an iron studies lab and you tell me and us like what to work on if this would be your result? Because I think it just helps bring it to life for people, right? Because we then don't know how to have the chat with the GP, or to know that maybe that GP is not going to be the best person to go on this journey with, and we need a nutritionist. And so iron 14.7. Are we good?
We're good. Yeah. So that means that you're either eating it or you're taking a supplement and that's in your blood. That's great.
Mm-hmm. Love a good steak and salad dinner. So tick.
Love it. Well done.
Okay. Transferritin was low. It was 1.9 in this one.
So to give that context, I'll need to know the other results and then we'll come back
Okay.
to one.
TIBC calcium was 44, also low. Saturation was 33 and ferritin was 89.
So with the transferrin being low, is that marked with an L?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that is your body saying, I don't want to take on more iron right now. So I then take that further, because what did you say your ferritin was? 80?
Oh, God.
Sorry, love.
Just got rid of it. And my 49-year-old brain is not open to remembering such facts.
Sorry,
I want to find it again. Oh, crap. I'm not going to be able to find it, am I?
Sorry.
Where
I didn't
was
write it
it?
down. What a goose. I got all excited because I was
It's
about to tell you
totally
a
fine.
story.
Here we go. So transferritin was 1.9 L, that's as low. TIBC was 44, saturation was 33, and ferritin was 89.
Great. Okay. So if I just saw your and this is again another really great reason for doing iron studies, not just ferritin on its own. So you just did ferritin, I'd say you are smashing it, Alex. You're kicking goals, whatever you're doing. This is working sensational. But the transferrin being low is your body saying, I don't want to take on more iron right now. So what I'm suspicious of, ferritin can be falsely elevated when there's inflammation or infection.
Hello, mold, illness, exposure.
Yeah. So let's say your ferritin and the body also, iron can feed, when there's an excess of iron, it can feed bugs. And so the body in its wisdom pops iron into storage away from being available until the infection or until the inflammation is over. So the transferrin being low is your body saying, I don't want more iron right now. We've parked it because there's other things going on. So I'd be curious as to, I'd go now look at, or if you were my patient at that moment in time, I would have then tested all your immune parameters. I would have looked at your white blood cells. I would have looked at eosinophils to see what was going on. I would also look at your hemoglobin to see if you're actually able to take in the iron and incorporate it into the hemoglobin. So yeah, there's something else at play. Sometimes iron is a really wonderful kind of little report card that can prompt insight into other things happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd be looking at infection or inflammation there, and I would question whether that ferritin is at 89 or if that's falsely elevated by inflammation or infection.
That's so good.
I explain that in the book.
And it really is just I'm so glad that I found that really quick, because it really just speaks to how often we don't deeply evaluate a bigger picture of our results, and we don't have people who are able to take us on that journey in their capacity.
Mm. Do you know
Mm.
the other thing? So, and I feel this is hugely overlooked when it comes to correcting our iron levels. We actually require all sorts of other nutrients for healthy iron metabolism. So this blows my mind. Every second we make 2.5 million new red blood cells.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they're all being produced in our bone marrow. And we have inside of us what's called the iron pool. So when red blood cells live for 120 days,
Mm.
and as they near the end of their life, I get people to imagine that a red blood cell kind of just dissolves, but there's iron inside a red blood cell, and that iron is perfectly good. So that iron gets sent back to the total iron pool to be
Mm.
recycled. So we don't just need good dietary intake of iron, we need to be able to recycle the iron that the dying red blood cells donate back to this beautiful iron pool, because so much of that is required to then go back to the bone marrow for healthy red blood cell production, which have such a huge impact on how we feel and function every day, because they're responsible for oxygen transportation to every cell in the body.
Mm.
So for that to happen efficiently, we need copper, we need beta carotene and vitamin A, and we also ideally need decently low levels of inflammation. So
Mm.
there are so for some people, when they'll say, I can't absorb iron, sometimes it's a copper issue. So if you can imagine that.
Yes, I was going to ask you about the competing mineral situation.
So if you imagine that, imagine the digestive system is a tube, and what lines the tube obviously are gut cells.
Mm.
And at the place where the iron gets absorbed, if you can imagine, the iron enters the gut cell. Imagine a clock face, an old school clock face. Imagine it entering at, say, 3 o'clock. And then that exposes that gut cell to free iron, which when there's too much of it, that's inflammatory in itself and can drive oxidative stress. And I'll explain how we overcome that in a minute. And then the iron's got to get out the back door of the gut cell to then enter the blood. And at the back door, there's another substance called ferroportin that's required to take the iron from the back door to the blood.
No,
And
it literally has the root word of portability, like take it somewhere kind of. That's crazy. Fantastic.
I love how you hear that stuff. And that's completely copper dependent.
Mm.
When you think about the really old school iron supplements that are really constipating for a lot of people, that's what they feel, foul, and it blocks them up. It's, they've often got 100 milligrams of iron in them, and there's no copper. So that iron just gets dumped into the cell, and then the ferroportin's got to hurry up and be produced to move it away from the back door. And if we don't have enough bioavailable copper, the back door of the gut cell can actually be damaged. It can be
Mm.
repaired, but it gets damaged. And also then our absorption of iron can be really poor. So my point being, we need these nutrient cofactors for really healthy iron metabolism once it's inside of us. And we used to get copper. Most of our houses had copper pipes, and we would get a little bit as the water flowed across it. And we have to be careful with it. You can have too much, but for a lot of people, copper is a part of it, is a missing piece to healthy iron metabolism.
Yeah, wow. I can't tell you. I reckon I've got 3 girlfriends who, over the last few years, have had the low iron disaster and the you must have an infusion. This is dangerously low, only to be more tired after the infusion. So, if someone was told this week, got to have an infusion, and they actually want to go through with it because it just feels like a really good idea right now, are you saying it's a good time to look up your high in copper foods kind of list, or take a supplement for a couple of weeks around that infusion to help with the whole transport sitch?
So an infusion's a little bit different because it's delivered straight to the blood.
Right.
So it bypasses that absorption
Ah,
issue. Yeah.
okay.
But with infusions, some people bounce back and they feel that they've got their quality of life back really quickly, whereas others feel worse.
Yeah. So what's happening with those people?
So there's a lot of information in that. It's quite often related to inflammation,
Mm.
and also to it can be related to oxidative stress. So it's right at a time where you want to really increase your consumption of all your fruits and veggies. Avocado's got some copper in it as well. Dark chocolate's got some copper in it as well. Yay!
I have this saved for after our chat.
I love that.
Full disclosure.
So organized.
Very organized. Mm.
So, yeah, so it's a time where we need and not just at the point of infusion, particularly in the lead up to it, is really recognizing that inflammation. I'm also infusions. We're so lucky to live at a time, Alex, where we have access to that kind of medicine, if you like, and if you get so low in iron, it's very dangerous. And so they are, an infusion is such a gift. My preference is that we catch ourselves way before we get that low and actually require an infusion, because a big surge of iron all at once is not ideal. There are much better way. We're much better off trying to maintain our iron levels in a healthy place all the time for all the benefits. Yeah.
And can we dig into, therefore, supplementation, Libby, just a little bit more, given we're on the infusion piece? And you did mention people feeling a bit ordinary on the bog standard kind of chemist options when it comes to like feeling constipated or that jazz. If we're needing to supplement, there are questions around like liver capsules and those organ meat capsules to just give kind of a nice organ meat hit. Is that a good option because it's a more natural bioavailable source? And then what do the plant-based or vegetarian eaters do if they're not going to be wanting to take something like that?
Thanks, Alex. So my favorite way of delivering iron in supplemental form is ferritin iron, but I'll round back to that. So we'll start with the liver. So liver can be an option for some people. The thing to watch is the liver in all animals, including humans and cows. The liver is a big filtration and detoxification station, essentially. So I see that there's a lot of those sorts of capsules out there now, and they say grass-fed, and that's excellent, but that's only part of what is required. It needs to be certified organic, because if the cows are grass-fed and that pasture has been sprayed with pesticides, then there's a concern, no guarantee, but there's a concern that the liver of the animal has accumulated some of those residues. We don't know, because it's still early days as far as
totally. And you can know your farmer much more easily if you're doing cow share or shopping at the markets, or you at least have a brand name and you can contact via email. But with supplementation, it's a little bit harder, and they're usually centralized depots that, freeze dried or liver gets to, and then it gets basically sold on. It's a bit harder to get the transparency, isn't it?
Exactly, Alex. Yeah. So that's a little watch out. The other thing too is there are some liver capsules where you actually need to take about 14 per day to get the amount that you need. So you might think that you're getting, you have your 2 capsules a day, for example, and for a lot of those capsules, it's not enough. For some it is. Some have done a superb job in creating a really high quality product, but there are many out there that are actually, in my opinion, of a really poor standard. And I feel that customers are not necessarily aware of how many capsules they actually need to take. So yeah, like everything, Alex, there's good quality and lousy quality kind of all in one category.
For sure. And if I had access to organic chicken livers, is that a good thing to fry a couple up with onions and put them on toast? Like,
Absolutely.
is that, yeah? Okay.
That's a gift to your earth suit.
Yeah, I really love that as a snack. There's a great recipe in my second book, guys, if you need some inspo. Yeah, delicious.
So, and then there's there are lots of supplements out there. Most of them are synthetic, so which means they're made in a laboratory. And as I touched on earlier, the 2 forms are ferrous Fe2+ and ferric Fe3+. And if you read the label of those supplements, they'll be coupled with either a salt or a chelate. And so when you swallow that, it reaches the gut cell wall, and a transporter is needed. So think of the transporter as a bus, is needed to take the iron into the cell. So at that point, so you've swallowed the capsule, the iron supplement for this is either for ferrous or ferric, and this transporter has to uncouple it from what it's attached to and then take that single unit of iron inside the gut cell, and then it's got to get out the back door like we talked about earlier and then tootle off to where it needs to go. And for some people, they do that very poorly. And it's why, as a supplement, my favorite is ferritin iron. So ferritin iron is sourced from organic peas. It's in all legumes, essentially. And ferritin iron has a very unique absorption mechanism. So ferritin is a natural protein cage, if you like, that humans make ferritin, all animals make ferritin, but so do plants. The plants store their iron inside ferritin, just like we do. So if you think of ferritin as a cage, it's a protein cage, and then inside that cage are thousands of units of iron. And when we swallow ferritin iron, in this example from organic peas, your body takes that entire ferritin cage full of that iron, and it's absorbed through its own unique mechanism that doesn't involve those transporters at the gut cell surface. And so that it's taken in whole and actually is delivered to the blood whole. So the gut cell itself is never exposed to free iron, which is why the ferritin iron is not constipating or irritating. It doesn't drive inflammation. And its absorption is so efficient because it's delivered straight through then to the blood. It doesn't risk hanging out inside that gut cell and damaging that back door. So that's my favorite.
And everyone can have that one. Doesn't matter what diet you're on. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's got great clinical trials behind it. In humans, double-blind crossover placebo-controlled trials, particularly for women with iron deficiency anemia that brought on by menstruation, for example. So there's some terrific, robust studies published, and it's in the scientific literature, but it's just not talked about very much. So yeah, I want to shine some light on that.
Yeah, nice. And then supplementation through food. What does the brekkie, dinner, lunch plate look like if we're trying to hit our iron goals?
Yeah, so there are times in our life where we can really easily do it through food alone, because iron is widely spread out through all sorts of food. We just need to be focused on it and eat for satiation. But there are times, obviously, in our life when our requirements are higher, when we need to be extra diligent about meeting our iron requirements through food. So obviously at brekkie, eggs contain some iron, and then you've got some lovely green leafy vegetables that you could throw in there. Just making sure there's also some vitamin C there so that you take that up. And then it might be at lunchtime. You need a proper lunch to get enough iron from food. And I know a lot of people find lunch tricky. They're busy, or they're not organized, or they just grab a coffee and a piece of banana bread on the run. That's not going to help you hit your iron target for the day. But if you can make leftovers and then take an actual meal with you, or if you're working from home, have an actual meal that contains, if you eat red meat, some kind of red meat, it might have, even shellfish contains iron. There's a little bit of iron in things like chicken and turkey, nowhere near compared to the red meat, obviously. And then if you eat vegetarian, things like lentils and some of the beans are also really great to include there. But you need a proper lunch to kind of hit your target. And then at dinner, like you said, steak and salad, steak and veggies, beautiful slow cooked meals. So in the book, I actually give a sample day of for an omnivorous eater and also a vegan eater to hit that.
Helpful. Thank you.
Yeah,
so good. And so let's talk about then, because I know we don't have a huge amount of time left, but I'd love to address just little spidey senses around, is it iron? In our daily life, we're going about things. You mentioned stress and oxidative stress, and that just for me sent me straight to that midlife woman who has the convergence of young kids or teenagers, aging parents, career peaks. There's a lot going on. And it seems to me that from what I've heard through girlfriends who've had iron issues that needed treating, like were really severe, it's all seems to be happening in the 40s and early 50s. And so you're passionate about us trying to catch this earlier. first signs that we need to not just think protein as a midlife macro, but iron very specifically? What does it look like?
So, Alex, superb question, and obviously so practical. So, it's really hard when I say fatigue, it's really easy to just write fatigue off to what you just said.
Mm,
And the the task list, the super high care factor, because when you talk about raising children, supporting aging parents, career peaks, that is a lot. And
yeah,
then
and you can put a lot down to that
yeah.
is where you're going with this, right?
And so when
Mm,
you just think, oh, well, it's normal that I would be this tired because of those things. And some of us carry our what we do. Some people, when I say to someone, tell me about your responsibilities, for
mm.
others, they will say it's a real privilege, and you can see they carry it quite lightly. Whereas for others, they're very burdened by a sense of responsibility. So
Yes. And you've shared the power of I get to versus I have to psychologically, and then how that translates
mm,
biochemically
mm,
before, which I think is just so fascinating. But at the
mm.
same time, like life happens and sometimes it's just a lot.
It's a lot.
Mm,
And so when you fatigue, we need to stop just going, oh, I'm tired because I'm busy. Fatigue is your first sign that your iron is inadequate. There are
mm,
three stages to iron deficiency. The first one is depletion. The next one is iron deficiency. The third one is iron deficiency anemia. So ideally, we keep our iron levels beautifully robust. But if we hit the depletion stage, the first thing we'll experience is less energy. So that's the time I would encourage women to have a yearly blood test for iron studies.
mm,
If you if that comes back and you're deficient, you want to address it and retest 3 months later to see that what you're doing is actually working. If it's not working, you need to change the path you're taking because you
mm,
want to recover it. Otherwise, it'll keep dropping. So, and then another, so once you're deficient, you need, I think I would recommend 3 monthly or 6 monthly blood tests to make sure it is actually recovering. But fatigue is your first sign. Other women will say to me, the first thing I noticed was my heart racing, heart palpitations, a real shortness of breath. I felt like I couldn't get my breath past my heart. The trouble with that one as well is that's something that someone will describe when they're not ovulating, when their progesterone is at zero or very, very low. Others will describe that sense when they're really worried about what's happening for their child at school, or they're deep, there's a deep, deep concern. So
mm,
because the symptoms of early symptoms of iron deficiency are so non-specific, that's why I think we just write them off to it's just life. And so
mm,
I'm urging women, it's such a cheap blood test to do. So, and it's not a complicated blood test. So I'm encouraging women to know their iron status and act to restore it, and use the fatigue or the heart racy anxiety kind of feelings as your sign that you're headed in that direction.
so good. And I'm pleased to report for those following along that I was also secretly trying to find my more recent one because I know I had done one, and we are back in the black all the way down. So my studies are good. And interestingly, that 2023 was also the crime scene period year where I started that perimenopause kind of like, what the heck is this crazy town? And then brought progesterone on board, and then that actually solved that problem entirely, which then, of course, solved the iron problem in part. But I also reckon antifungal medication, which was extremely crucial to my mold recovery, also then brought the inflammatory situation down. So, like, I don't want to make people feel like, oh my God, that sounds so complicated and like you had to investigate a ton of things. But it's just to know yourself and to be really true. Like what I'm hearing from you, Libby, is what I always hear from you, which is you are your best guide. And if you know something's like, but I can usually do life,
Yes.
why not now all of a
Yes.
sudden? There are
Goosebumps.
obviously going to be reasons. You are you know you.
Mm. And do you know when women will say to me, when they've recovered their iron status. The things that probably light me up the most is what they say they feel they have back. And the number one thing the thing I love the most is resilience.
Hmm.
We don't want to have to handle a lot, but we often do need to be able to handle a lot. And we can see the privilege in that. Or I remember one lady saying to me one day, she said, I just feel defeated. And after I checked in with her about what was happening in her life, I then said, do you know your iron status? And she said, my last blood test, my ferritin was 6.
Oh.
And I said, did you do anything about that? No, I know I should. They said I needed an infusion, but I said, that is dangerously low.
They shouldn't have let her out of that office without a plan.
Yeah. And so she's living feeling defeated and like she can't handle what's happening with her teenage, the big story. And it's true that those things can be very, very difficult, but we have far greater reserves inside of us and we're far more resourceful when we have good iron status. So anyway, she feels like she's a different human now with her iron having been restored, and that the teenager is still a real challenge, but it's not undoing her. She's just present with that and deals with that on a day-to-day basis. So resilience is my favorite thing that recovers when if we are iron deficient and we recover it. Blows my mind.
Yeah, wow. And for me, that really speaks to like the devastating impact that an iron deficiency can have, really speaks to the importance of not in our tech algorithms letting any one conversation about silver bullets right now in trend, or like when an issue wakes up, like the emancipation of women being able to now freely choose an HRT path again.
Yep.
Like I love that for us, for the people who want that. That's great. Yeah. But it's so loud that we may actually be missing some other things that might bottom out at this particular juncture of life because of the oxidative stress, the inflammation, all the other things, that we then start on HRT and then feel like a failure because the HRT is not the amazing thing that everybody else on the internet said they were experiencing. Meanwhile, you've actually got an iron deficiency, babe. Let's sort that out. Like, we really need to make sure we give like almost equal parts attention to any possibility and make sure that our health professionals are the type not to jump on bandwagons either, I think.
Alex, that I wish I could bottle what you just said and shout that from the rooftop so that
we recorded it, Libby, so you can. But I see like the beauty of having interviewed this many people is I see the network of what floats to the top rather than any one thing.
Yeah, exactly. And to find when, like I said earlier, the road in is the road out. If you are iron deficient, nothing will correct what that is creating in you other than restoring iron. So whereas let's say your thyroid isn't working properly, it's underactive, and it might be an iodine deficiency. Well, no amount of iron will fix that. Iodine will. So it's knowing what's creating the dysfunction in us. And what I want to encourage people to consider, could it be iron deficiency in you or someone you love? Because it is the most common nutrient deficiency in the world, and it's growing. A study was published out of the States at the start of last year, and it was looking at women aged between 12 and 21. And 39.6% of them had iron deficiency anemia. So that's the most severe form. And 3 times that number were just iron deficient, which is still terrible.
Wow.
So it's such a massive problem. And I just don't feel like it's getting the attention that it needs to. And we often attribute, we kind of blame, we have a tendency, I think, right now to blame other things for what might be iron. Of course, I'm not saying it's going to fix everything, but if you are iron deficient, I really encourage people to recover your iron status, and then see what's left over.
Love it. And if I can just bring this home with like a couple of basics to consider if we are then supplementing iron, copper is important. Can I extend just a teeny tiny question on that? on when we get our little follow-up blood test, should we then check copper and zinc to make sure we haven't thrown another thing out? Sorry, I know that's like a whole extra thing, but I just thought of it and I think
No,
you
it's
can
great.
answer us right now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's come up for you, it'll come up for listeners, absolutely. So, yes, so it's some practitioners will actually assess copper in the blood. Others will tell you that that's not an accurate blood test to reflect copper
Mm.
status because it gets incorporated into other things. So I found some doctors and integrative functional doctors prefer to test ceruloplasmin, which is that copper dependent enzyme. They find they get more insight when they test ceruloplasmin, and then obviously zinc as well. So iron needs copper to do all of its beautiful work inside of us, but iron and zinc disrupt each other. So you don't want to be focused on recovering iron while forgetting about zinc as well. And for a lot of people, because red meat is one of our best sources of both iron and zinc, if that's been low in someone's way of eating or non-existent, it's very easy to become deficient, obviously, in iron and zinc. So
Mm.
if you supplement iron, it's best in the morning, although you want to have it at least 30 minutes away from tea and coffee because the polyphenols in those drinks disrupt iron absorption. But iron, studies have very clearly shown our absorption is better in the morning because hepcidin is a substance the liver makes. It's like the bouncer at the stadium. When we absorb iron, hepcidin is low, but once hepcidin climbs high, it blocks iron absorption, and hepcidin is just naturally a little bit higher in the afternoon. So we wanted to supplement, if we're supplementing, iron in the morning and zinc at night.
Love it. What a
Mm.
masterclass. And then the book is just an incredible iron guidebook, basically. It really is the story of iron and what to do,
Mm.
and how to know you need to do something, because there's a lot of conflicting information, and a lot of people can know they have a deficiency, but then not feel improvements when they address it in a typical way. So
Mm.
I feel like from this show, from your new book, Libby, we're just so lucky to have you doing the work you do. And I want to say thank you so much for joining me back on the show.
Oh, Alex, I want to say all of that back to you. Thank you for doing the work you do in the world. You've had such a big impact on my life so deeply.
Oh,
I know that you reach so many people and your care factor is through the roof. And yeah, thank you so much for how you care and all the ways you show that.
oh, now you're going to make me. I haven't even pressed stop yet. Hold on. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
I hope you loved today's show as much as I loved bringing it to you. I want to remind you that if you are someone who craves a low tox community that is judgment free, full of empowerment, has health professionals and building health professionals that can support you, as well as me in there answering questions multiple times a week, I want to invite you to join the Low Tox Club. For the price of less than a cup of coffee a month, you have an annual membership for $49 Australian, so it's about $30 US or euro, that allows you to have a member masterclass every single month with a health professional or global expert from the podcast, where we have them to ourselves for an hour to ask questions and deep dive further. You have the beautiful supportive chat group. You have Q&As with me answering questions. We read books and talk about them, and a whole bunch more. You can head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the explore tab, and join the club is the very first option on that list. Of course, we have over 10 evergreen courses that you can jump into anytime, whether it's navigating everyday low tox swaps with our Go Low Tox signature course, whether you have kids and you're wanting to know how to best support them with our Low Tox Kids course, whether you're planning a family and looking at a healthy low tox preconception journey, reducing inflammation, especially the chronic kind, with our Inflammation Ninja course, many other courses. You can again head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the courses tab, and you'll see all of the options, which includes a business course, my Low Tox Method program. A lot of people don't know, but I was doing a lot before starting Low Tox Life in 2009, and I was a business consultant across hospitality, health, retail, and cosmetics. I have been in business consulting for a very long time, so I absolutely adore helping people move into the low tox space or develop their low tox businesses. So that's a way I can support you. And then, of course, there's our wonderful social media communities at Low Tox Life on Instagram, and of course, the website with over 250 gluten-free recipes, blogs, downloadable PDFs to help you navigate wanting to get rid of synthetic fragrances in your school or office. I could go on. So head to lowtoxlife.com, see what takes your interest or fancy, and thank you so much for being a part of our podcast community. I love, love, love reading your reviews. I appreciate every follow and subscribe, and I want to just remind you to finish off that if there's anything you heard that you found interesting from a medical or scientific perspective, it is intended as education only. Please always chat to a health professional who knows you and your situation best. I'll see you next week. Bye.